Hey there! Welcome back to the Human History Project, where we turn the past into stories you can share at dinner tonight. Today, we're lighting a candle and stepping into 17th century England to meet the quiet doctor-philosopher whose ideas still echo today. So grab your thinking caps and let's travel back to 1668. In this moment, the philosopher most known only as a thinker calmly helped drain a life-threatening liver cyst from Lord Anthony Ashley Cooper, the future Earl of Shaftesbury. The patient survived, Britain gained a political powerhouse, and Locke earned a patron whose friendship would launch some of the most important ideas in modern history. But how did he end up there? To answer that question, we need to travel further back in time to the 29th of August, 1632, in the village of Rington, Somerset, where John Locke was born. He was raised in nearby Pensford by his father, who was a lawyer captain for Parliament in the English Civil War, and his Puritan mother. Even though John Locke's family was not wealthy, his father's position meant that he had access to excellent education. John attended Westminster School in London and earned a scholarship that took him to Christ Church, Oxford, first studying classics, then medicine. There, he befriended leading scientists, building relationships that taught him to test ideas against experience. In 1667, Locke moved into Lord Anthony Ashley Cooper's London household as a personal physician, secretary, and economic advisor. When not treating patients, he drafted constitutional plans for the Carolina colony and learned day-to-day politics from inside Parliament. Now, that opening scene makes more sense. Lord Anthony Ashley Cooper becoming the Earl of Shaftesbury in 1672 gave John Locke a platform and a powerful patron. However, political winds turned dangerous in the 1670s, and Locke went abroad to Holland, where he refined the manuscripts that would become an essay concerning human understanding and the two treatises of government. After the Glorious Revolution of 1688 secured greater religious freedom at home, he finally published them. Locke's philosophy wasn't hatched in isolation. Each insight bubbled up from real people, messy politics, and late-night experiments. Let's follow him as 5 of his world-shifting ideas take shape. Picture a student physician in Oxford, peering through Robert Boyle's air pump 1 hour and helping Thomas Sydenham chart smallpox fevers the next. Locke noticed something. Every new case note begins on empty paper before experience fills it. The metaphor stuck. Years later, he anchored an essay concerning human understanding on the claim that the newborn mind is tabula rasa. Let us then suppose the mind to be white paper, void of all characters. All our knowledge is founded on experience. By replacing innate ideas with lived evidence, Locke hands the keys to future scientists and teachers. Test, observe, repeat. Modern psychology's experiments and today's growth mindset posters trace straight back to this blank page. The Civil War scars on his father's uniform, and later, Shaftesbury's power struggles with King Charles II taught Locke how fragile life and liberty really are. So he drafted a moral safety net. Natural rights that exist before any king, parliament, or priest by writing, "No one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions." Printed in the Second Treatise of Government in 1689, the passage made its way around the world, sparking revolutions in the Americas, France, and Haiti. Locke's years inside Parliament revealed an awkward truth. Even well-intentioned rulers slip when there is no one to stand up to them. In chapter 19 of the Second Treatise, he wrote, "Government has no other end but the preservation of property." He argued that if a ruler fails to meet that goal, the people could replace them. The idea justified England's own Glorious Revolution in 1688. Then, it later stamped itself onto every constitution that begins with "We the people." While in Holland, Locke saw a city where Calvinists, Catholics, and Jews all lived and traded side by side. Back home, he later wrote a letter concerning toleration, in which we can read, "I esteem that toleration to be the chief characteristic mark of the true church." By arguing that the state should police actions, not private beliefs, Locke paved the way for England's Toleration Act of 1689, and a century later, the First Amendment guarantee of religious freedom in the U.S. Bill of Rights. While tutoring young Anthony Ashley III, Locke found that lectures do little, but fresh air, questions, and gentle discipline do wonders. He bundled the advice into some thoughts concerning education, in which he wrote, "A sound mind in a sound body is a short but full description of a happy state in this world." Centuries ahead of its time, the book defended play, early exercise, and reasoning with children. These are still blueprints for a lot of our teaching methods and many of today's school recess policies. Schools in the 1600s were very different. 5 problems, 5 ideas, and we can get a glimpse of the foundation of our modern world's user's manual. But Locke's story isn't finished. Some cheered, others jeered, and one uncomfortable contradiction still shadows his name. The Whig Party, a loose coalition of English members of Parliament who rallied to limit royal power, defend Protestant succession, and enlarge Parliament's role in government, embraced Locke's call for limited monarchy. Enlightenment stars like Voltaire praised Locke, and less than a century later across the Atlantic, Thomas Jefferson listed Bacon, Newton, and Locke as his intellectual heroes. Not that Bacon. Sir Robert Filmer, however, called Locke's consent theory a recipe for anarchy. Locke answered him sentence by sentence in his first treatise, dismissing Filmer's claims as glib nonsense. Thomas Hobbes warned that Locke's limited government could collapse into chaos without an absolute sovereign, and clergymen also feared toleration would lead to a collapse of church authority. Before we leave Locke's big ideas, we need to confront a contradiction that historians still debate. While serving as Lord Shaftesbury's secretary, Locke helped draft the fundamental constitutions of Carolina. One clause declared that every free man of Carolina shall have absolute power and authority over his slaves. As part of his government salary, Locke was paid shares in the slave-trading Royal African Company. This was a common practice for officials in the 1600s. He sold the stock after a few years, but it tied him financially to the trade. So why did he do this, even though it clearly contradicts his beliefs? Well, first of all, there's political loyalty and a paycheck. Secretaries rarely refused assignments or compensation set by their patrons. Locke was still climbing the career ladder and had not yet published his mature philosophy. Many believed that he was not in a position where he could stand up against his patron. In his second treatise, Locke argues that only guilty war captives could justly be enslaved, a definition that, on paper, invalidated hereditary plantation slavery. However, critics said this was a loophole big enough to sail a slave ship through. Supporters, on the other hand, claimed that he was trying to undermine slavery by making its moral bar impossibly high. Decades later, while on the Board of Trade, Locke backed policies that restricted massive land grants to slaveholders and encouraged baptism of enslaved children. These are moves that some scholars saw as an attempt to chip away at the institution. Others argued that these gestures were too little, too late. The verdict? Historians are split over this, and most of everything else. Holly Brewer of Cambridge University thinks Locke was mainly a paid penman, not an architect of slavery, and that his later work shows he was uneasy with it. James Farr and Richard Ashcraft reply that the clause and the stock holdings reveal a blind spot that undercuts his talk of equal natural rights. Even great thinkers have shadows, and studying them helps us test and strengthen their brightest ideas. Chronic asthma forced Locke to retire in 1691 to Lady Masham's country home in Oates, Essex. Surrounded by friends like Isaac Newton, he kept writing letters and revising his works until breathing became too hard. On the 28th of October, 1704, as Lady Masham read the Psalms, Locke whispered, "Cease now," and died peacefully, aged 72. In a human history that spans hundreds of thousands of years, it is almost certain that Locke was not the first to have these ideas of natural rights and equality. However, he was among the earliest to have the privilege of living in an era where ideas spread as a result of the printing press and where he had access to an education that gave him the eloquence and a platform to spread his ideas. From the U.S. Declaration of Independence to the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Locke's fingerprints appear wherever people talk about freedom and fairness. His insistence on evidence-based knowledge fuels every science fair. His toleration shapes every multi-faith neighborhood. And his right of revolution reminds leaders that power belongs to the people. So next time you hear someone say, "I have rights," remember the quiet physician philosopher who once saved a life and in the process helped save liberty for generations to come. What do you think of John Locke's ideas, and how do you see the contradictions we discussed? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.